Hi there. Would you love to know what to do this spring when you go to that IEP meeting and you're talking about extended school year services and the district offers you one of those one-size-fits-nobody ESY service? No, that's not what we want to take for our kids. So tonight we're going to be talking about ESY services, how you can make sure that you don't accept that one-size-fits-nobody ESY program. Before we jump into our program, I have some exciting news to share with you. We're going to have a special edition of our Facebook Live show this Monday, April 3rd, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon Mountain Time. So that means 5 o'clock for you people on the Eastern time zone, and 2 o'clock for you in the Pacific time. But we're going to be having Jack Robinson, who's the Colorado attorney who represented the family in the Andrew versus Douglas County School District court case that went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And the decision was just handed down this past week. So we have a great show planned for you. Jack Robinson, the attorney who was there in the United States Supreme Court, is going to be here with you live. You'll hear his highlights of the decision, how that's going to impact your child, how we're going to be looking at what is appropriate, what kind of benefits and standards are going to be used to define that free, appropriate public education. And you'll be able to ask him your questions live. So please write this on your calendar, Monday, April 3rd at 3 o'clock Mountain Time. Put it in your phone, set an alarm so you don't miss this live show where you get to ask an attorney specific questions about this Supreme Court case that we just had the decision handed down last week. So it's going to be awesome. But tonight we're finishing up our month-long series about extended school year services. We're going to be talking about common scenarios that happen and what you can do and say when you're at the IEP table. But before we do that, let's make sure, I always like to do a tech check. If you're hearing and seeing me and I'm not fuzzy or muted, make sure you give us a thumbs up that you can hear us, and I'll do a check here. Is everybody hearing us? Let's see. I'm waiting for a thumbs up. Can you hear me? I don't want to keep going through the program if you're not able to hear. So I think I hear myself on my phone. So we're ready to go. In case you don't know me, I'm Charmaine Thaner, and I founded the advocacy company Collaborative Special Education Advocacy. I'm a parent of an adult son who received disability special education services. I'm an advocate now. I work with families. And I'm also the author of a #1 best-selling book, The Art of Advocacy, A Parent's Guide to a Collaborative IEP Process. So as I said, we're going to jump into different scenarios that you might have heard when you were talking about extended school year services for your child. So the first scenario is you remember to ask for a draft IEP, so that's awesome, and you're looking at the draft IEP one evening and you notice on the page where it talks about extended school year services that the box is already checked no, that your child doesn't qualify for extended school year services. And you're like, what? How did they already make that decision? Now, yes, we know it's a draft. However, when there's decisions like this, I really don't understand why in a draft IEP, they've already checked a box that makes it look like they've already predetermined a decision. So if this happens to you, if you see that the school staff has already checked that box before you've even had your IEP meeting, what can you do? Well, my suggestion is to follow up with an email, because you know how important those paper trails are. And when you send your email to the special ed teacher about extended school year services, there's a certain format that you can use that's really helpful. It prevents, just kind of writing off this angry email, and it makes it a little more reflective, and I think it's received on the other end by the special ed teacher in a more positive light. So I call this a communication guide or communication template, and what it is 6 simple steps, and the first and the last step are just to start and end what you're writing in the email with some type of positive statement. And then in between, the first step is to say something objective, something that you observed, not with any kind of judgment. And then the second step is to say in your email how that makes you feel. Then you talk about a need that you have that hasn't been met. You give a specific request for what you want, and again you end your email with a positive statement. So this not only works for emails, but it's a great formula to follow when you're having face-to-face conversations with folks or you're having a telephone call. So this is an example I'll give you tonight of an email that you could send as a follow-up. So again, you start with a positive, so you could say, "Thank you for sending the draft IEP to me ahead of time." And then you say your observation. "When I was reading the IEP today, I noticed that it was checked no for ESY services." Then you say what your feelings are. "I was disappointed to see this was already checked before we even had the meeting." Then you share a need that's not met, and you could say, "I need to be an equal member of the IEP team." Make a request. "Therefore, I'm requesting that ESY services be open for discussion at our upcoming IEP meeting." And you end it on the positive note. "Thank you again for sending a copy of Susie's draft IEP ahead of time." So again, this is a great formula that you can use for emails or conversations. And I actually put this all in a wonderful handy dandy free report that you can get, and it's entitled "How to Be Heard at IEP Meetings." So if you would love to get this free report, just type yes in the box there below our live video, and I'll make sure that you get the link for it. So again, let me just check here and see if we have any questions, and let me see what we have. Yael's joined. All right, Yael says that looks good. Yes. And so this is a resource that I give to parents, and I just think that you'll really appreciate the tips. Not only does it give you the formula inside that you can use, but also several different examples. Well, let's head over to our second common scenario that we see at IEP meetings during the springtime. Many times parents will hear from the staff, "Well, your child's making progress and they really aren't eligible for ESY services." So if you hear that as a parent, what can you say? What can you do? And here is a response. you could ask the staff to share the data that they've collected to show that your child is making so much progress that they don't need any extended school year services during long breaks. We want to make sure that IEP decisions are based on data, just like we want to make sure that ESY decisions are based on data. Sometimes the school will tell you that they've looked at data before a vacation, after a vacation, and your child just did fine. Ask them to bring that data with them to the meeting and have them explain it to you. We want to make sure we're making decisions on objective data and not just subjective, well, you know, it really seems like he's done fine after each vacation. We want to see that black and white information that they've collected, that objective data that they've collected. So make sure you do that before you accept the fact that your child isn't eligible for ESY services. Our third scenario that's common is the staff will say, well, you know, your child didn't show any regression or recoupment. So this regression and recoupment is probably one of the most common factors that school districts will consider when they're looking at whether or not your child can get extended school year services. We've talked about this on a previous video, but remember that regression is after a long break. It can be after Christmas break or spring break or summer break that your child lost a lot of the skills that they had before the vacation. Recoupment is when it takes your child a significant length of time to get back to those skills and at that level that they were at before vacation. Now, if your child doesn't show regression and recoupment, in most states you still have other factors to consider. So don't consider that decision done until you look at some other factors. And as we had talked about in an earlier video, you need to make sure that you know your own state's regulations, your district's policies about extended school year, because different states have different factors that they use. There's very few states that only consider regression and recoupment. So chances are, even if your child doesn't show, you know, that he's lost skills and it's taken him a long time to get those skills back, chances are there's another factor that your child may qualify for. So for instance, in Idaho, one of the ESY factors that the team has to consider is self-sufficiency. So the team asks the question, would an interruption in services threaten the acquisition of critical life skills that lead to independent functioning? So again, maybe there's not recoupment and regression, but maybe there's a student that is, you know, just starting to learn some of those independent skills like toileting or dressing or feeding themselves. A lot of times we think about these as adaptive skills. If your child is just starting to learn these skills and it's really critical for them to be able to master those skills before they become an independent adult, then you can bring that up at the discussion about ESY services. Now, most of the time, most states have a standard in there that ESY services are just to maintain skills, not to gain new skills, but to maintain the skills they had during the regular year. Some states, again, have an emerging skill. So as a factor, if your child is just learning a skill, if you live in a state where they have emerging skill as a factor, you could use that as the rationale for why your child needs extended school year services. So I know all of these can be confusing. If you aren't sure what your state regulations are about ESY, type in the box what state you live in, And I'll be happy at the end of the video to come back and give you a link for your state regulations. And I'm going to pause for a second and see if we've got any questions, because it's so much more fun when we have an actual discussion versus just me talking all the time. So if you have a question about a specific situation that your child's in, and you would like to be able to discuss that tonight while we're on the live show, type it in. If you happen to watch the replay of this show, you're always welcome to type in questions and comments on the replay, because I'll come back to this periodically, this Facebook show, and answer any new questions that are there. So feel free to partake in our conversation tonight. Let's go to scenario number 4. This is when you hear at the IEP meeting, yes, your child qualifies for extended school year services. And you're like, yes, I'm happy. And then the next sentence out of the mouth of the special ed teacher is, so this year, extended school year services are for the month of July, Monday through Thursday, from 8 until 12 o'clock each day, and all the ESY services will be at this elementary school. Well, guess what? That surely is not an example of individualized ESY services. And just like your child's school year services are supposed to be individualized, also extended school year services need to be individualized. So as a parent, in a situation like that, one of the things that you could do is politely remind the staff that your understanding is ESY services need to be individualized also. You know, so many times it's frustrating because I think people forget about what that I stands for in IEP. Well, guess what? That IEP has to be followed during extended school year services too. Now, one of the things to consider is exactly which IEP goals does your child need to work on during extended school year. Some students just have 1 or 2 IEP goals that it's really necessary for them to keep working on. Other students have all their IEP goals need to be worked on during ESY. So identify which goals that you want your child, or I'm sorry, don't use the word want, use the word need. What goals does your child need to work on? Look at the accommodations in the IEP that go and support those goals, and talk about during ESY, how are those services going to be individualized? For some students, just 4 weeks of ESY is not going to be enough time. Or for other students, maybe they need ESY in August before school starts. So don't think that you have to accept what the typical district program is, because that's where we fall into that one size kind of fits nobody thinking, and we need to make sure that it's individualized for your child. We have one more scenario here that I see, and it's becoming more common in IEP meetings. And this is when the staff doesn't think that the least restrictive environment, or LRE, doesn't apply to ESY services. So think about it for a minute. In your child's IEP that they follow during the regular school year, there's a section probably near the end of your IEP that talks about the least restrictive environment. And in there they talk about the percentage of time that your child is going to be educated with typical peers in a general ed classroom or in another situation where they can be with children without disabilities. Well, that LRE, that least restrictive environment, is also a factor and a consideration for the summer programming or whenever you have extended school year services. So don't, again, fall for the idea that, oh, we can't do that during ESY. All of our kids come together at this school. They all have IEPs, and that's how the district does it. One of the things that you can point out to the staff is that LRE, or you could ask, why wouldn't LRE also apply to ESY services? And you can have a discussion around that. One of the cases that's really important to look at, excuse me, is a case that came out almost exactly 3 years ago in the Second Circuit Court, which is on the eastern side of the United States. And in that Circuit Court decision, they said LRE doesn't take the summer off. So guess what? If your child's getting ESY services in the summer, LRE applies. Look at your child's goals. Do they have goals about, social communication goals? That they need to be having a model of typical peers to be able to have those conversations and practice their, back and forth conversations. Well, if they're in a school during the summer that only has students on IEPs, there's no way they can achieve that goal of practicing their social communication skills with typical peers. So the key is to look at your child's IEP, which goals they're going to work on over the summer or during extended school year services, and make your case for why there needs to be typical peers to help your child achieve and maintain the skills that they had during the regular school year. Now, recently I had a mom from Colorado reach out, and she had found this awesome community group that were doing a variety of activities in the summer. And she thought, this would be perfect for my son, not to have him go to the elementary school 4 days a week and sit in a classroom, but to actually participate in this community program would be an awesome way for him to get extended school year services. So one of the things that she did was to mention the Second Circuit Court decision about LRE doesn't take the summer off, but she still got pushback from the district. She got a letter back from the district saying, they thought that community program, was an asset for the community. However, they didn't see how that would meet her son's IEP goals for the extended school year. So you really have to think about making your case and being able to connect your child's specific IEP goals with how they could be met in something different, like a community or park and rec kind of activity during the summer. So again, you could look at, communication skills. You could look at if your child has any behavior goals in their IEP that they're going to be working on through ESY services. And you could talk about the behavior models that he's going to see when he's participating in the summer park and rec program, and he's going to be following directions from the coach or following directions from his teammates, and how that's going to meet that goal. You want to have your rationale thought about ahead of time before you ask for something different, because like all of us, the district is going to default to what they're used to doing, and that's that typical, 4-week program, half days, 4 days a week kind of thing that they offer everyone. So if you want something different, if you want something individualized, and that allows your child to be in the least restrictive environment, it is going to take some careful planning ahead of time to get all those reasons and rationale thought about So when you present that proposal, you have a better chance of getting a yes from the district. So if you are a Pinterest person, you can go on to my Pinterest site. It's the URL is listed on top there, and I have a posting on my inclusive education board that is all about LRE doesn't take summer off. And if you want, you can click on the exact link right before that graphic, and it will take you to that pin. And actually, the link will also take you to the decision from the Second Circuit Court. As much as possible, when you bring in actual court cases, I think it gives more credibility to what you're asking for, and it shows the district that you do have some foundation to, make your request from. I'm going to stop for a second and see if we have any questions. Yael says, that's a great comment. One size fits nobody. And that's the truth, right? So I don't see any other comments now. Like I said, if you watch this on the replay, post comments and questions, and I will come back and answer them. So let's look at a quick summary of what we've talked about tonight. Tonight was all about 5 ways to say no to one size ESY. The first tip is to make sure that you download How to Be Heard at IEP Meetings and get that communication template. And if you want that, just type yes in the comments and I'll give you the link. Our second tip was to make sure that we ask staff to share the data that they've collected. They should be having data to show how your child did before vacation, how your child did after vacation. If they're talking about the progress that your child's making throughout the year, they should have data that go with the progress reports. So always ask for the data that they're using to base their decisions on. And then the third tip, was to make sure that you are aware of your own state's ESY regulations, because they are different state to state. If you need help finding them, put a comment in the comment box and I'll give you a link for the state that you live in. The fourth way that you can say no to one size ESY is to make sure that the staff understands that all ESY services have to be individualized. Remember what that I stands for in IEP. And our last tip was to share with the staff that LRE doesn't take the summer off. And LRE needs to be a factor and a consideration when building that individualized ESY program for your child. So I want to just do a quick reminder that Monday, April 3rd at 3 o'clock in the afternoon Mountain Time, I'm going to be interviewing Jack Robinson. He is the Colorado attorney that went to the U.S. Supreme Court in support of the family, and the case was Andrew F. versus Douglas County School District. You've probably heard about this in the news. Last week the decision came down, and we've got a great opportunity Monday afternoon to talk to the actual attorney that was there in the United States Supreme Court. Jack will be giving us highlights of the decision. He'll also be taking your live questions. So this is a time where you can make sure that you have a chance to actually, have a time with an attorney who was successful in the Supreme Court case and ask him how that's going to impact your child and tips that he'll be giving us on how we can use that decision when you go to your next IEP meeting, because it's going to have an awesome positive impact on over 6 million students with disabilities in our country. So that's Monday coming up, Monday afternoon. And until then, take care and keep speaking up and speaking out for your child. Thanks.